Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I have in sample form. It's by an Australian brand by the name of Toucan. Bright green. And it is so very that. It's a very, very bright green. Yeah, the only thing I had that was even remotely like this was Pilot's mixable cartridges in their light green, but even that wasn't this light, and I didn't have a swatch of that, but yeah, the only swatch I had that was even remotely similar was Diamine's Kelly green, which as you can see is a bit darker, and this is too light for me to use, so I was a bit hesitant about Toucan's bright green. Yeah. Now, all of these Toucan inks are meant to be mixed together. They're a mixing ink, so a lot of people think, oh, okay, well, if they're meant to be mixed, you don't want them to be super saturated. Actually, I would disagree. It's better for them to be more saturated, and you can thin them out. But you can't add more saturation, and it's been a bit of a problem in a couple of the inks that I've tried from them so far, but we'll get to that. The two pens that I used were these. This is a Pilot Vanishing Point with a broad nib. You can't read it because it's yeah, anyways. And the other one was this Nemosine Singularity with a 0.6 stub. So it's a quite small stub. And the thing is, it was actually misaligned. So you might see in some of the tests, it looks like it's struggling, and it's because it was misaligned for part of it, and so the inside of the tines was catching on the paper, and the flow was off, but I fixed it before it was over. But yeah, anyways, let's check out the chromatography. As you can probably see, I keep catching my watch on something. Anyways, as you can probably see, not a lot of water resistance. You can see this like vague, almost yellow where it started out, and then this bright, almost cartoonishly lime green, and then this band of blue up at the top. And then I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. And as you can see, nothing changed. So, yeah. Paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. I can hold this still, but good lord, am I caffeinated right now. Yep, it is so bright. It is a very, very bright green. You do get some shading, and it does have a slightly wet flow. I'd say it's a 6 out of 10, which, look at that broad. It was certainly coming out of that. And even that tiny dry stub, it was ready to come out, but it wasn't, these are downstrokes, which does tend to spread the tines a bit, so yeah, you do get some shading. But for some reason, I noticed like almost a woolliness in the broad nib. I don't know why, but yeah. Anyways, the 0.6 stub took 9 seconds to dry. The broad took 19, which isn't too bad considering it's slightly wet and it's a broad and this is very dense paper. Yeah, as you can probably see, if you look at the of or the slightly or the B and bright, you can tell that this was before I had fixed the alignment. So yeah, and look at this water test. This is a disaster. Yeah, just an utter mess. Lots of yellow feathering and exploding. That would not be fun to try and recover. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All very good in that regard. Next up is Fabriano paper, 85 grams per square meter. Even though nobody asked for this, I don't think that this is so strange to include. I've found this paper, God, I found it when I was in Spain. I found it when I was in Berlin. I found it when I was in they have a wonderful store in Rome. They have it everywhere in Florence, considering Fabriano is a city sort of just south of Tuscany. Anyways, it's 85 grams per square meter, but it's not as steamrolled flat and smooth the way that Rhodia and Clairefontaine is. It has a little bit more texture, but it's not toothy. It doesn't feel like the fibers are going to break off and get stuck in your nib. It almost has like a cushioniness to it. I can't describe it. I highly recommend you try some. It's very good, and it actually tends to handle inks that even some Clairefontaines and Rhodias have trouble with. Now here you can most definitely see some shading. The small stub took 7 seconds to dry. The broad took 16. You do get a mild halo effect. You can see in the Stub I had not corrected the alignment yet. I was getting frustrated. But yeah, you get this wonderful sort of like a halo effect. It's quite nice on here, but trying to read like a full page of this would be difficult for me. My eyes would protest. But yeah, also as the chromatography kind of implied, you're going to get that teeny bit of yellow remaining and everything else is going to be long gone. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no echo, no sheen. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where the 0.6 Stub took 7 seconds and the broad took 12. And here again, you can kind of see how wet that must have been. And here I had started to try and realign the nib, and I was getting better at it, but there were still a few moments where I was like, all right, I gotta fix this. Now, you do see some shading, you do see some halo around the wettest parts. You do get a little bit of that woolliness in the broad, but you do get a bit of a halo in the 0.6 Stub. So, you know, not bad. There's no bleed, no feather, no echo, no sheen, no spread, all that. And again, the water test really, for some reason, right here. Oh, yeah, it had, like, bloop and gotten back behind it. Anyways, but yeah. So, pretty good in that regard, but you do get some, like, weird texture on here. So, rather strange. Now, next up is Tomoe River paper. And, yeah, you definitely get some shading on here, but this is also where it starts to almost look a bit thin. Yeah, it's just, I wish it were just a little bit more saturated, because I think that would also make it just a little bit darker, make it a little easier for me to read. But it's still very vibrant, even where it's darkest. And you most certainly get a halo effect. You don't get sheen. It's just sort of like a dark outline. Now, this paper is known for drawing out dry time, so that 0.6 Stub took 14 seconds, and the broad took 25. But yeah, it looks rather nice on here. And as you can probably tell, by then I had pretty much realigned the nib and things were working again. But yeah, this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add more water, and that absolutely happened here. That is completely gone. What little remains, like you can see, like every other dot and the down lines and that's because it's the broad. I put down more ink, so more remained. But yeah. Now, for the next 3 tests, I only used the 0.6 Stub, except to write the name. Now, here's the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, where I'd like to show you the spread. Yeah, I got a good deal broader, and since it's such a fine Stub, you know, it's a small one, it almost stops looking like a Stub altogether. Now, we do lose all shading, which makes it look very light and kind of hard to read. For some reason, it took 2 seconds to dry. I had to prime the feed once I got to the absorbent papers. Like you can tell, you see how light that starts. Like here, dark, dark, lighter, 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 dark. I had to prime the feed because it couldn't keep up with the sheer absorbency of this paper. But even though once the tip on that 0.6 was aligned, it felt like a wet ink, we had some problems. Now this is absorbent paper. It tends to suck the ink in, make it harder to wash out. So what's there is darker than most of what we've seen, but it did wash some of it out. Since it's already such a light ink, that would be very difficult to read. In fact, the camera's making it darker. Also, it feathered and exploded. So we got spread, and we got some bleed, or some very near bleed. Okay, that's the broad, but I mean, we've got stuff, and that's a very small nib. It's very fine. You know, it was dry writing. Yeah. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper, which is thinner than 20-pound copier paper, but I also want to show you, yeah, look, it hasn't spread as much. There is a bit, and if you look, there's really not much feathering. Okay, except, oh no, that's not it, that's just from, yeah. So, it's absolutely killing it. I mean, look at it. No feathering. Almost no spread. 1.5 seconds to dry. There's no shading, and it's already such a light ink, and there's no shading to darken it up. It's really uncomfortable to read, but yeah, and look at that. No bleed. Like there, I went over something twice, but I mean that's pretty much the closest we get. Even in the scrubby, that's really not bad. And, okay, the broad almost, but not bad, right? And again, this is a slightly more absorbent paper, so it sucked some of the ink in. You want to wash it out, but it washed some of it out, so it's still quite bright. That would be difficult. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which is awful, and I hate. It's terrible. I know people hate me for saying that, but have you watched any of my reviews? Look what keeps happening. What is wrong with this paper? Why do people buy this? It's so expensive for what you're getting. Stopping now. Anyways, as you can most definitely see, if my camera will ever focus, see that like intense woolliness? I mean, it looks like wet wool. And I mean, it's like bleh, not nice. And it feathers a lot. They're spread. For some reason, it took 4 seconds to dry, even though this is obviously absorbent paper. And I mean, this is a very small stub, and it was really dry. Like, it was dry even when it was aligned properly, and yet we still have this. Okay, that's the broad, but I mean, it's everywhere. And this is this really fine. This is one of my finest and driest nibs now that my Waterman is out of commission, but it's bad. And then what even happened there? I mean, I wrote that and I could barely tell you where water and test separate. That's insane. Holy moly. So, yeah, there you go. There's Toucan's bright green. If you need a bright green, well, actually, maybe go with Kelly green because it's just a touch darker. But it actually did fairly well on Mead notebook paper in a finer, drier nib. But Moleskine, forget it. 20-pound copier paper, maybe don't bother. Fabriano looks fantastic if you can read it. Tomoe River, dry times are drawn out. There will be the absolute opposite of water resistance there. But you do get a dark halo, which is kind of pretty. Yeah, if you want a bright green, this is a lovely bright green. It has pretty much no water resistance whatsoever. But it's the brightest green I've ever seen. So, yeah, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.